Hello, and welcome to What Matters. I'm Jim Hickey, Vice President of HCM Transformation at Oracle, and I'm very happy to be here with you live. Today we're talking about one of the topics that matters most to HR leaders right now, employee experience. It's the latest buzzword in HR, and rightfully so, given the upheaval in work in the past few years. Employees have shifted their priorities and are looking for a culture that supports their growth and well-being, both inside and outside the office. So what does a great employee experience look like in practice? What works, what doesn't? Today we'll be talking with HR leader Tiffanie Lewis of Diebold Nixdorf and well-known analyst Jason Averbook. I think we're going to learn a lot today and maybe even be a bit surprised. But first, a reminder that we want this to be an interactive conversation between you and our guests. My colleague Erin McGannon is here ready to take your most burning employee experience questions in just a few minutes. Hi, Erin.
Hi, I'm so excited to be taking your live questions to our guest today, and you could submit your questions through the chat box on your screen. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Erin. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, so let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our first guest, Jason Averbook. Jason's CEO and co-founder of LeapGen, an expert in HR technology and the future of work. Welcome, Jason. It's great to be here with you today.
Thank you. Great to be here, and humbled and honored.
Thank you. So employee experience, we've seen this topic explode over the last year. Organizations are listing as a top priority, and they're focused on this as one of their most important topics. So maybe it would help if we start with a definition. What is employee experience, and what does it mean?
Yeah, when we think about employee experience, what we're doing is we're making sure that we understand how our workforce feels. How our workforce feels when it comes to themselves doing their jobs, being part of work. Now, when I say how they feel, like we've been tracking forever, and there's going to be people that say, oh, we've been doing engagement surveys once a year, and we've been doing performance reviews once a year, and we ask them once a year how they're doing. That's not employee experience. That's a bad employee experience. When we talk about employee experience, we're being in real time as individuals are doing their jobs. How do they experience work? It's so important to remember it's 2022. Outside of work, what year does it feel like inside of work? And it's not just about technology, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. It's about how do they feel throughout the entire journey.
Got it. Why does employee experience matter?
Great question. I mean, if we think about it, why does it matter how your relationship is with people outside of work? One of the things that we constantly need to work on in the HR space is to remember that we're humans outside of work, but guess what? We're humans inside of work. So does experience matter? Does your customer experience matter? Of course it matters. Does your relationship with your spouse, partner, family members matter? Of course it matters. Why does employee experience matter? Of course it matters. We've shifted to an experience economy. We've gone from a manufacturing economy to a knowledge economy to an experience economy where everything needs to be measured based on experience. And that's what will determine the longevity, the satisfaction, and the productivity of the workforce.
Got it. So tell me a little bit about what is a well-designed work experience?
So great question again. You're really good at these questions. When we think about a great experience, an employee experience, it starts, and it has to start with putting the employee or putting the human at the center. I don't like to just say employee because it could be an applicant. It could be a candidate. It could be a contractor. It could be an alumni, all of which are equally important. So when we think about that overall, where does it start and where must it start? By design, keyword, designing with the human at the center. And what that requires is that we understand the human. We listen to the human, and we truly design with them in mind. So we in HR forever have spoken a language called HR. And that's interesting. It's important to us. But when we think about the workforce shouldn't know how to spell HR. The workforce just wants to get something done and get it done in a way that feels and deliver satisfaction so they can go back to doing the job that we hired them to do. That's where employee experience starts, designing with the human at the center.
Got it. Great perspective. So we've talked in our prior conversations about building empathy at scale. What is the role of empathy in designing an employee experience?
So if we think about empathy, we've been good at delivering empathy for a long time. If you think about the HR business partners in the field, at a restaurant, in a plant, in an office, if we go in and talk to them, they're going to be empathetic, of course. But as the world of work has changed, what's happened is we've had to think about the fact that that HR business partner may not be right there. They may not be sitting there in their office waiting for you to come in and say, my wife's pregnant. What are the benefits that my company offers? So that being said, I have to think about how do I deliver empathy at scale? The only way to do that in 2022 and beyond is through digitization. Okay? We in HR have been so good at talking about high touch for so long. Like we want to deliver a high touch experience. We live in a world today where we need to ask the question, is it high touch digital or is it high touch human? And make intentional decisions about which of our journeys do we want to deliver in a digital way to scale empathy that way, and where do people really need to talk to a person to have empathy delivered human to human.
Human to human. I understand. So let's talk about that. This idea of personalization. What is personalization?
So how do we personalize anything? Think about it for a second. We personalize things by knowing information, data, qualities about the person that I'm trying to personalize something towards. So if I'm going to dinner with my mother, I know my mom and what she likes to talk about, which is different than I'm going to dinner with my spouse, versus different which I'm going to dinner with you. So understanding and listening to a person and leveraging data, allows you to create a personalized conversation and a personalized experience. One of the things that we haven't done in HR is taken advantage of the data that we have to truly personalize. So we've been really good at counting people, but we haven't been great at making people count. And this generation, this employee experience generation that we're in, requires us to start, which I know we're going to get to in a second, with the mindset that I'm going to deliver personalization through the data that I have about you. Okay.
So let's pick up on that idea. What's the role of technology in personalization and in employee experience?
So think about your favorite app or your favorite website. Somehow, magically, it knows you. Right? Somehow, magically, it knows you. It's not magic. It's leveraging data, right? The way data, is used is what delivers that personalization. It's what makes it simple. It's what makes it easy. It's what makes it relevant. But what's most important is that what makes it feel like it was designed for me. If I feel like it was designed for me, guess what? I'm more than likely going to use it. If I feel that it was designed for someone else and it's not relevant to me, guess what I do? Abandon, call, and all of a sudden people say, I don't like this technology. So the role of technology is to fuel your vision. The role of technology is to bring your vision to life. And one of the problems that a lot of organizations have is they don't start with a vision. They think that technology is going to create the experience. Technology fuels your vision. Technology alone doesn't create the experience.
Understood. So let's pick up on this idea of what are the top 3 challenges you see organizations come up against in regards to employee experience?
So probably the first, and I'd say the most important, is ownership. Who owns the employee experience? Think about that for a second. We have people that own the intranet and portal from a technology standpoint. Do they own the employee experience? They play a role because that's the front door.
Sure.
That's where I start. Does HR own the employee experience? Of course they play a role because their job is to drive engagement, satisfaction, retention, et cetera, et cetera. But think about for a second, who does the employee actually work for? They work for the business. They work for a manager. They work for a leader. Does that leader own employee experience? Yes. So what's really important, the first thing, is to realize that ownership is an enterprise discussion. It's not just an HR discussion. The second thing is that organizations don't create great, what I like to call measures, or what we like to call measures of success. So they'll say, let's go live with this technology, and it's going to create a brilliant employee experience. And then they're like, this isn't what I thought. I had an intranet link farm before. Now I have an intranet link farm, only in a new piece of technology. So really saying from a measure of success standpoint, what matters most? And the what matters most can't be me only in HR looking at myself through a mirror, but looking through a window at the workforce, thinking about designing for that empty chair and saying, what will the workforce love? Okay. And then the third thing is the sequencing of how I deploy. Okay. And when I say sequencing of how I deploy, notice there's a difference in terminology between deploy and implement. Implementing technology is one thing. Deploying my vision is something completely different. And to get people to adapt, unlearn old ways, and learn new ways requires really important sequencing. So we used to live in a world where minimum viable product was the way to go.
Right.
When we think about experience, we live in a world where minimum lovable product is a requirement. First time that someone sees something, it has to be minimum lovable. And if it's not, what do? The same thing you do when you download an app and you don't like it. You delete it and you never go back. So we have to focus on those three things: ownership, measures of success, and how do I truly create something in the first phase of deployment that people are going to love.
Interesting perspective. So to that end, what are your top 3 recommendations for elevating the employee experience?
So one of the things that's so important about elevating employee experience is to understand where you stand as an organization when it comes to digital maturity. Employee experience is not a project. Employee experience is a way of being. One of the things that's really important when we work with organizations is we try to get them to stop saying we're going to do a digital project, but we are going to be a digital function, which means continuous improvement, sustainability. All of that is key. Not asking someone once a year what their experience is, but asking them at the end of a journey, thumbs up, thumbs down, what did you think? If they don't like it, let's make an adjustment. The second thing is to truly realize I need a solid anti-fragile foundation. Okay. If I don't have a good foundation, all I'm doing is putting frosting on top of a moldy cake. I have to have a foundation that has my data. Okay. Otherwise, when I think about amazing tools like Oracle has, I can't use them, right? I can't personalize if I don't have the data, if the data is scattered all over the enterprise. And then the third thing is to realize that technology alone doesn't create experience. If I type in a piece of technology, I'm having a baby, and nothing pops up, what happens? I get frustrated. If I type in I'm having a dependent, what pops up? A screen for me to change my dependents. Guess what? That's me implementing HR technology versus deploying human capability. So when we think about elevating that employee experience, how do I deploy human capability in the language and in the style and where I meet the employee in their flow of work? That's the key to driving and elevating experience.
Oh, this is great. I really appreciate your perspective. Are you ready for some audience questions?
Oh, if there are some, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to toss it to Erin. Erin, do we have some questions from the audience?
Yeah, we have a lot of great questions that have come in. And one of them that I'd want to start with here for you, Jason, is what is your non-negotiable in an employee experience strategy?
Wow. So the non-negotiable in an employee experience strategy is truly designed for the employee. We don't call it HR experience. It's not an HR experience strategy. It's an employee experience strategy. So the non-negotiable has to be designed, which means I have to understand personas. I have to design journeys, not processes. Processes generate data. Journeys generate feeling. And at the end of the day, how I'm going to measure success within my employee experience is how people feel. Not just the processes that they check a box and complete, but how they feel.
Okay. Erin, any other questions?
Yeah, I think this next question kind of translates well from what you just talked about, the importance of design. But this question here poses, to support employee experience, what's the best way to collaborate with different lines of business? Because sometimes it feels like it's all on HR.
Yeah, another great question. What's so important is when we design our personas, we have to take into account, one of the things people oftentimes think about when they think about personas is, hey, I've got 8,000 job codes, so I need 8,000 personas. That's not right. In fact, it's wrong. And we work with a major airline where they have 3 personas: in the air, on the ramp, and in the office. You know, and back to Erin's question, those are different lines of business. But the way those people work, the way they can work, are they at a desk? You know, are they on a ramp? Are they in flight? The experience has to be focused on how do I meet them where they are. So the way that I break the silos of lines of business is to understand my people and design for them. You know, am I working in a quick serve restaurant? You know, where I don't have kiosks or machines around. I have on a mobile device. Versus do I have a laptop in front of me? You know, understanding the challenges in someone's job, the roadblocks, the hurdles, and being able to bring those into my design is what's going to drive the success across those various business lines.
Interesting. Erin, do we have any other questions?
We have another question, and I think it's along the lines of what you've been talking about, Jason, and it's how are end users, not key users, shaping the design of the new user experience UI, especially irregular users that want to engage the solution to get things done quickly with minimum support.
So Erin, you hit a hot button for me. Our employees, our candidates, our alumni, we should never call them users. They're humans. And when we think of, even when we say UI, it's not a user experience or user interface, it's a human interface. So when we think about how do we design for them, it's realizing they're not users.
Right.
Like, they're not just another license seat, just like we don't deploy modules in the world. We deploy journeys that cross modules. We think about how do we understand the human. And the way we do that is by understanding how the human feels along each step of the journey. So if I'm going through and saying I'm having a baby, I go through and watch a quick video from the CEO saying, congratulations. The next step takes me to a transaction where I enter some information, but then the next step takes me to a place where it shows me the perks, discounts, rewards I get as a new parent. Guess what? That's going to make me feel good. I just delivered a human experience. A user interface is simply one step on the way to creating that human experience.
Got it. Okay. Erin, anything else from our audience?
Yeah, we have another great question here for Jason on asking some advice. What are some effective ways to increase employee engagement? And then this one's a bit more specific. Are there any specific recommendations for the federal government?
So when we think about, once again, we think about the federal government or any industry. I mean, it's federal government, but we could take this across healthcare. We could take this about retail. It's making sure that I understand what's important to that group. You know, federal government, once again, broad. I'm not going to design for just the federal government. I'm going to design, and that's a mistake a lot of people make. I'm going to design for the type of human I have interacting and creating an experience. So, Aaron, I would beg that person to get out of HR, understand the worker, understand the sentiment of the worker right now. Are they happy at work? Are they not happy at work? Do they feel they have a career path? And make sure that my messaging around deployment ties back directly to what I learned from listening to them. If all I do is push out an HR message, like a peanut butter spread, and I do the same thing, whether it be the federal government, retail, healthcare, it's not going to work. It's tone deaf. We're not listening to how to meet that human where they are and how to help them bring their best selves to work.
Got it. Thank you. And thank you to the audience for sending in these great questions. And Jason, thanks so much for joining us. I will see you in just a little while back in our Q&A.
Sounds good.
All
Look
right.
forward to it.
Excellent. I'd love to know what our audience is thinking, though. How would you grade your current employee experience? And viewers, you'll see this poll question in your chat. Let us know what you're thinking. Now let's get to our second guest. I'm happy to introduce Tiffanie Lewis, Vice President, HR Technology and Service Solutions at Diebold Nixdorf. Tiffanie, welcome. I know we're going to have a lot of fun in our conversation today.
Thank you, Jim. I'm glad to be here.
So a few moments ago, we polled our audience on how they grade their current employee experience. Tiffanie, if you had to take a guess, how do you think most graded their experience on a scale of A to F?
This is a tough one. I think it really does depend on your industry. I think people who are in industries that are very progressive may say B, but people who are in industries that are long-term industries, long-term companies that may be laggy around this focus of employee experience may go with D. So I have two answers, if that's fair.
That's fair enough. Well, let's see what our poll results are. Are you surprised at all by these? So we've got 11% people of the audience grades themselves as an A in employee experience, with most a C. What's your reaction to that?
I'm not surprised. I think that a lot of companies are really shifting their focus and trying very aggressively, especially in this environment where employees and candidates are in control. They're really trying to step their game up in this space.
So a lot of people thinking about it. So we heard a little bit from Jason before about what a well-designed work experience looks like. For you, there's a step that comes before that, though, right?
Right, absolutely.
So what's foundational to you? What has come before the employee experience objective that we're all chasing?
What we like to say at our company is being brilliant at the basics. And what does that mean? How do you get to a place where you can create a seamless experience for employees? Well, one example is having a core HR system of record, like Oracle, which we have adopted. That's back to Jason's point. That's exactly what you need in order to have your data in one place so you can take the appropriate actions. You need to collect the data, personal information, job information, location, salary. These are basic things that tell you about your workforce and what you can and cannot do based upon that information. That's critical. I think what I would say secondarily to that, Jim, is vision. At Diebold Nixdorf, our guiding principle is to be the undisputed leader of self-service technologies. And so when you are in the business of building and servicing ATMs, as well as self-checkout kiosks, self-service is what we are all about as a company. But how do we bring that experience to our workforce was something that was a challenge for us. But that's foundational. And then once you have that basic data in place, you can get to the wow factors.
Got it. So what's your operating model as you've approached employee experience?
Sure. Every organization needs to decide the cost that they're willing to pay to get the results that they want. And that's different for every organization. For us, one of the things that we wanted to do is really think about what could our journey be for digitization but also how do we help employees with that journey? So one of the things that we created were employee service centers, and we wanted to have one point of contact for employees to say, if I have a question about anything related to HR, where do I start? And that was very helpful for us in that journey. So we leveraged Oracle's HR help desk for that capability. And we do have phone lines, but I'm very pleasingly surprised to say that only 4% of our employees contact us via phone. It's either email or self-service for 96% of our tickets.
Wow, that's impressive. So I understand that one of your proudest professional achievements has been your digital HR transformation that you embarked on during the pandemic. And if I remember right, you implemented your 3-year roadmap in 12 months.
That's
with
correct.
10 modules in 62 countries. Is that correct?
That's right. 10 modules, 62 countries, 12 months. And it was quite a journey, if I say so.
So talk to us a little bit about that. Can you share more about that and how it's enhanced your employee experience?
Sure. Well, we started our HR transformation actually during the pandemic, which was quite challenging to do, being that most of us were remote during that entire time for the last 2 years. But we were committed to really figuring out how do we enhance the employee experience. We started with just collecting our core data in our core HR system, but we wanted to expand that experience from talent management, talent acquisition, compensation. It was very difficult to do with having so much disparity in our systems. And so in a lot of cases, we processed this information manually, and we did not have a consistent way to do that globally. So it was important for us to figure out what were those key next steps for us to enhance the experience, the overall employee journey, very similar to what Jason was saying, not just part ways of the journey, but looking at the entire employee life cycle was important for us. Mm-hmm. And so throughout the process, we talked about what would enhance the experience as we move forward. What can we do now, recognizing that we had a pretty aggressive timeline, and what might we do later to optimize it for employees?
Great. So tell us about lessons learned on the journey.
Yes, I think one of the things that was a big lesson learned for us is to pay attention to language. And I'll come from two different perspectives of that. It's not just the mother tongue of your individual's language, but also what you call things. To Jason's point, if people are thinking about having a baby, they don't call their babies dependents. So if somebody wants to do a search and find a knowledge article about what do they do when they're having a baby, you should probably use the word baby, and you should probably have that word baby available in the language of the employee. And so that was something that we had to think about, definitions, and making sure that we could define things from the perspective of the employee, not from the perspective of HR, which is very challenging. And then having descriptions along the way was another very important thing. So we use info buttons to describe what is this section for, what is this button for, what can you do with it.
Interesting. Thank you for that. So Jason and I talked a little bit about this before, but I'd like to talk with you about how does empathy play a role in how you're thinking about employee experience, and how does your perspective inform your work?
Absolutely. So during the past 2 years, my team have had a variety of experience. Some of them have been sick themselves, or their family members were sick, or they've had loss in their families. When I think about my team, it reminds me that they also are employees. They also have an experience, and they matter. And that gives me insight into what I should do and how we create plans for the future, just thinking about their own experiences, even though they're a part of the deployments or the implementations. Mm-hmm. My unique experience is, quite frankly, being an African-American woman, I experience a lot of challenges that many people may not even imagine. My concerns, my fears, my personal circumstances are real, which gives me a unique ability to empathize quickly with others.
What a great perspective. Thank you for that. So, Erin, I'm wondering, do we have any questions for Tiffanie from the audience?
We sure do. We have some great questions that have come in. The first one here I would want to start with for you, Tiffanie, is based on Diebold Nixdorf being in fintech, what have you had to think about in your employee experience that another industry might not have to?
Yes. Well, thinking about personas, you have to think about your workforce and how your workforce is made up. For us, a significant portion of our workforce are service technicians, and they are essential workers. They are primarily remote, and they have needs as well, but very different than those who are in offices or who work at home and with their laptops. So we had to think about employee experience solutions, and we're still thinking about them. That we have to consider every type of worker in the business and how do you meet that need. So just yesterday, I was in the office talking to an HR business partner, and he was explaining that a manager is trying to find home address information for an employee, but they were frustrated with how long it was taking them to speak to somebody to get that information. And I said, well, have you tried the mobile app? He said, I didn't know we could do that. And I said, yes, we can. And I said, in 3 minutes, I can get the home address as a manager of one of my employees. And he said, wow, I'm really going to have to show them that. And so those are the kinds of things that you have to make sure that you're thinking about, listening, and then thinking about what you're hearing and providing those solutions. And it's an ongoing journey.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Erin, any other questions?
Yeah, I think expanding on that and some of the points that you just brought up, one question here that was posed, and that's actually pretty popular, is, well, what are your recommendations for effectively engaging the deskless worker that only has access to technology sporadically?
Lots of different options for that. We are exploring some different ways, and I wish I could talk about all of them now. But some of it, you really have to consider, are they using their mobile devices? And if they're not using their mobile devices, how can you create a space for them to connect when they get to a location that maybe you have in that particular area? So is there a way where you could have a kiosk, for example, that's available to them? Mm-hmm. Is there a way that you could have, laptops in a business center in a location? And so one of the things that's really neat about Oracle is that you can access it from any location using any device. And so that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of making things available to all levels of our workforce.
Interesting. Erin, I think we have time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, I want to make sure I include this one for you, Tiffanie. The audience member says, I applaud your push for employee self-service. We have a requirement that most of the employee self-service questions be handled without people interaction. So they're asking for advice. How do you approach that?
We put a heavy emphasis during our deployment on knowledge articles and using a knowledge management system, because we wanted to have the information that we knew, information we carried around in our heads or in our folders or in shared drives. We wanted to translate that information, transform that information into something that could be readily accessed for employees. So we had no central location for all that information, especially being in a global environment. And we put a huge focus on that. And I think by the time we went live, we had over 800 knowledge articles to make available to employees to find that. And so that focusing on the knowledge, getting it out of the heads of people and in the ways where it can be accessed by everyone in the company is extremely important to create that urgency or that solution, if you will, to that problem of not wanting to have a lot of human interaction. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions, Erin?
Yeah, we sure do have a lot of questions. Another one that's come in right now that I think would be interesting to hear from you, Tiffanie, is how are you at Diebold Nixdorf measuring the success of your employee experience?
Sure. I would say the employee adoption of the tools that you put in place is something that we definitely look at. We want to know how many people are leveraging the tools that we put in place. So how many people are accessing it on a monthly basis? How many people are using the new tools that we push out to them? What are they not using that we want them to use? And how do we provide a push to that? We look at the number of tickets in the Employee Service Center and where those particular areas are of focus that we need to spend more time. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes we dig into that with greater detail, especially if there's a blip or there's a trend of something spiked in a particular area that we did not expect. We have customer satisfaction surveys. We also have pulse surveys from an organizational perspective, from employee engagement, and annual engagement surveys. And so that all of those things are what we do to try to measure the success of the experience. And not to say that we've gotten it all figured out, but it is a starting point.
Excellent. I think we've got a lot of questions, Erin. Any others that you'd like to present to Tiffanie?
Yeah, I think this last one here poses an interesting question. My leadership is slow to accept that the world has changed and employees want remote opportunities. How do I help shift these attitudes around flexible work?
Sure. I am a huge believer that employees will help you with that. Pay attention to your attrition. Look at your time to fill roles. Candidates will help you with that. That's data that will give you insight for sure into whether or not your employee value proposition will stand. I was on a plane this week, and there were some passengers talking about a manufacturing engineer who wants to work 100% remote. And these two gentlemen were just furious. And they said, how could he think that he could do a manufacturing engineering job 100% remote? But I can imagine that probably when the world was shut down, there were manufacturing engineers who were at home and were effective at getting their work done. And so you have to think about this, and it goes back to changing a mindset. And being in a global pandemic has taught us that what we thought was not possible is certainly possible. And that is what we have to remember. And employers have to consider that flexibility and what flexibility they will offer so that that is unique to them, so that candidates will be willing to be a part of their organization and they can retain the key workforce that they have.
What a great answer. Well, I think we've got time maybe for 2 more questions, Erin.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we definitely have a lot more for you, Tiffanie. One other question that I have is, how do I get buy-in and resources from leadership on employee experience initiatives?
Yeah. One thing that is absolutely critical is to learn what the business objectives are and align your employee experience initiatives to those business objectives directly where possible. You have to make that initiative relevant to the leaders, relevant to your C-suite, so that they can support you with whatever you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Especially, depending on the size of your company and the tools that you're investing in. These are not cheap. There's an investment that is involved here. And leaders want to know that they're going to get some kind of return on that investment. Sometimes it's very difficult to measure in terms of hard dollars, looking at ROI. But when you think about what you can measure, like we talk about the 7 forms of waste, and complexity is a form of waste. And one of the things that you can do with digitization is eliminate complexity and move towards simplification, which ultimately will help the business leaders achieve that objective. So it's how do you tell that story for leaders to latch onto and then support you, not just in word, but also with the finances that you need to continue along the journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. One more question.
Yeah, one more question. So you talked about the importance of eliminating complexity, and I think that translates well into this question here, which is, well, how do you actually determine what delivers value and what doesn't? And is it just an action for action's sake? Do you measure implementations?
Yeah, you can. And I can't say that in my career, we haven't measured implementations just to see, can you get it done on time? Can you stay under budget? That's important. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you can implement something and you can deliver it on time and under budget. But if no one's using it, you haven't gotten the value out of it. So this is something that's important to understand is who's using it? How are they using it? Are they asking you for more? And that is a real important measure for me is if I produce reports and they're helpful to leaders and they want more, that's a good sign that we're delivering value, right? If we are providing some self-service and leaders want more, then that's a sign that you're delivering value. And even if they want less and they're talking to you about what it is they don't like about it, that gives you an opportunity to make some adjustments in your plan. So all feedback is good feedback. It's either going to tell you what to do or it's going to tell you what not to do. And so that's always something you have to take into consideration as you're developing your journey.
Thank you so much. And thanks for the conversation. Are you ready to bring Jason back for some Q&A?
Let's do it, Jim.
All right. Before that, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our collective Q&A with Jason and Tiffanie.
Here's a secret HR leaders know. The Great Resignation didn't come out of nowhere. Your best employees give their heart and soul. They want to do work they love for an employer they trust to have their back. If you want people to stay, you need to really know them. Like Jada in your head office, who loves her job but can't find the right development opportunities. Or take Priya, who stopped reading your emails because they never include anything relevant to her. Or there's Luis. He struggles with working from home but feels like his manager's too busy to listen. They're great employees with talent and potential, and they all belong in your organization. But you can't just say that. You need to show them. That means you've got to recognize each one as an individual and meet their unique needs, which isn't easy when you have a big workforce. And that's exactly where Oracle Me comes in. Oracle Me, part of Oracle Cloud HCM, is the only employee experience platform that guides, connects, and supports your employees by using a single, comprehensive source of people data to help you give each person exactly what they need to do their job better and feel connected to your company. Oracle Me makes it easy for people to find and complete their most important activities, helps you get the right messages to the right employees at the right time, and helps managers continuously listen to their employees, check in, and take action. So now Jada can find opportunities to flourish and grow. Priya engages with your emails because they're always relevant, and Luis knows that even if he's out of sight, he's never out of mind. With Oracle Me, everyone gets a personalized experience and feels like they belong, so they can connect, grow, and thrive. After all, trust is earned through experience, and that's no secret.
Welcome back. I've been looking forward to this Q&A. You both bring such interesting perspectives to the topic. I'm wondering, do either of you have any insights after hearing each other's conversations? Any takeaways, any thoughts? And I'll start with you, Tiffanie, I think.
Absolutely. I think, Jason, one of the points that you made is about the recognizing that we're humans inside of work and outside of work. That ties well to my personal philosophy about remembering that my team members are employees too, not just my implementation team, right? So that's important. I think the other thing is, how do you deliver employee experience or empathy at scale? I like the way that you talked about that. Digitization be the way you can do that. And personalization, as long as you have the data to do that, makes that much easier.
Mm-hmm. Jason, how about you?
You know, one of the things, Tiffanie, that I love that you talked about is when you think about empathy, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. I mean, just in the last 2 years, we've gone through global pandemics, both of social justice, an older pandemic, but a new pandemic with COVID, and right now we're in the middle of an economic discussion that we don't know exactly where it's going. So empathy at scale is not just something we deliver during bad times, right, or it's not just times of, certain issues. It's always. Right. And the listening to what's going on and looking for signals and being able to try to think about that, as Tiffanie mentioned that she's been thinking about, is really, really important. The other thing that Tiffanie mentioned, and I think it's so crucial, is that question about leaders and how to get leaders to invest. It starts with a mindset. Technology is so important, but it starts with that mindset. Tiffanie said aligning to the business. If you can help leaders unlearn, adapt, it's one of the number one skills I think HR leaders need right now, is how to unlearn some of the old ways that we've done things and realize that the now of work that we're in right now requires us to act, think, and respond differently. Tiffanie, I love the way you laid that out as part of your deployment.
Great insights. So are you both ready to hear some questions from the audience?
More,
Absolutely.
let's go.
Okay. Erin, this is where you come in.
Yes. I think that this first question that I have would be good to pose to Jason. And it's pretty interesting. What it says is, after 2+ years and total remote working, we've sadly fallen back into working in silos, HR, benefits, payroll, IT. What tools can we use to break down these silos to improve our work experience?
Wow, great question. That could, Tiffanie, I'm sure you have an answer too. I'll try not to stuck too long here. But really quickly, one of the things that's been, it's not just in the last 2 years, it's been for quite a while. Remote has made it even harder, is that we work within these things called COEs, Centers of Excellence. You know, and Centers of Excellence, their responsibility is strategy, policy, and delivery. By definition, their responsibilities are strategy, policy, and delivery. But if each COE delivers their own thing, guess what? The experience feels fragmented. It feels siloed. The data is siloed. So one of the things that we do a lot of work with organizations today is putting in place an experience center of excellence that takes the delivery capability out of each of those COEs. And it doesn't mean they're not capable, but it means the employee could care less whether they're talking to recruiting, comp, payroll, benefits, et cetera, et cetera. Right. They just want an answer. They just want to get something done. So have the COE's own strategy policy and then build a group of people like within Tiffany's group to coach and advise them on how their initiative fits into the broader experience strategy. That's really, really key to break those silos, both from a data standpoint, a delivery of journeys, but also realizing that I've got one employee, one human that I'm trying to deliver one experience to.
Got it.
Yeah, I think, Jason, something you said in your earlier chat was, who owns the employee experience? It is a constant conversation. And if you don't have a single person that you provided that leadership role to, it doesn't mean that that person owns all of the processes, all of the policies, but that person's responsible for developing the journey, bringing those individual functions together to talk about how we have a collective strategy and a prioritized joint project. And that is not easy to do. But I think that the trend that we will have is more of those kinds of people so that we also can think about how do we simplify things? Because if 5 different functions come up with a solution for one problem, then you actually have created complexity and you're going in the opposite direction.
Got it. Got it. Any other questions, Erin, from the audience?
Another great question that's come in, and it's pretty popular, is how do I measure employee experience across generations? For example, Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers.
I can start, Jason.
Go ahead, Tiffanie.
I think you can build on this, Jason, but one of the first thing is you have to track information about the generations. How do you know who's a part of which generation? So you start with tracking that information with birthdays, get age ranges, and then determine what you want to measure and pair that data with. And so you take those age ranges and say, what are the behaviors that we're seeing with those various age ranges? Are those the behaviors that we want to see? And if not, what do we do differently for those groups? I think it starts with really being able to hone in on what data do you have to help you.
Yeah, and if I could just expand on Tiffany's point, I think one of the mistakes we make is just focusing on a demographic like that. If we think about that, there's another important characteristic. Well, there's many, but another one is called a technographic. You know, if we think about a technographic, am I a creator? Am I a critic? Am I a spectator? Or am I inactive? And if we think about how we operate outside of work, if I'm inactive outside of work in using tools, forget how old I am. Guess what? Inside of work, I'm probably going to be the same way. So it's really, really important to not just look at the age. And I know the question wasn't about age, it was about categories, but it's really about age. There's also massive cultural differences globally when we think about this. So we have to take all of those things into account and realize when we measure this, it's really a Rubik's Cube. It's not a one-dimensional report that says baby boomers are X, Gen Z is Y. It's really a Rubik's Cube I have to look at of multiple characteristics that make up a person.
Got it. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Erin?
Yeah, I think this next question kind of goes back to the first question that was asked, and it states, remote work has generally resulted in a drop in trust among associates. So what are your recommendations for improving trust, the heartbeat of a good culture? And I think for this one, we can start with Jason.
Wow, Erin, thanks a lot. Tiffanie,
Easy.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that's really important to think about that T word, trust, is that's what drives all of this. Like, neither one of us have talked about that really, but that's what drives all of this. If someone goes and puts data in a system, and guess what? The next day, what they get back isn't what they put in, the trust is gone. You know, if that's self-service or what we like to call direct access that Tiffanie deployed, you know, if someone gets there and they don't have an info box or they don't have that press 0 to get help, guess what? The trust is gone. When we think about remote work, you know, our job is to trust people first. I maybe just created a whole bubble of question. But what we want to do is we don't want to monitor people. We want to enable people. That is the expectation of the workforce of today. So giving them the tools they need to do their job, A, making sure that we treat them like humans, and realizing that remote is not changing their job. It's just changing where they're sitting. And when I say that, giving them the tools, when we think about employee experience, is the employee experience the same, whether they're in an office or whether they're in a house or whether they're in a coffee shop? So like trust needs to go across all of those areas. And anyone who doesn't trust a remote worker today really needs to look in the mirror, in my personal opinion, and say, guys, this is the now of work. Guys and gals, excuse me. This is the now of work. This is the way work is going to be. What do we need to do to instill that into our leadership? Tiffanie, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Absolutely. You know, I have this handy dandy book, Jason.
Now I'm embarrassed.
I am embarrassed, right? And the author of this book, who will remain nameless, says progress happens when people push past the comfort and stability of routine and force themselves to think differently. I love that line. And Jason, and it is a mindset shift to trust people first, because you know, HR used to be the kind of function where we were responsible for compliance and people were afraid and people were, you know, challenged with, should I do this or should I not? Am I going to get in trouble? But if you start with trust, you start conversations off with a very different attitude, very different perspective. And you'll find that there is speed, as Stephen Covey says, speed to trust. And I think that is extremely important. And leaders have a responsibility to create that environment where trust can be exchanged.
Tiffanie, can I just thank you for looking at the book? It makes me feel good that someone actually read it. So you made my day.
All right. I think we have time for one more question.
Yes, and this last question's answer might be found in that book, but I want to pose it to both of you right now. And it's, is there anything you'd recommend as a first step for a quick win for organizations that are currently getting feedback from employees that they aren't employee-centered?
I'll say this. This is important, and you may not think about this as being an important thing. It might just be something you expect to happen when you're getting employee feedback from a survey or through any other forum. The key is to take action on the feedback and let them know, here's the action we're going to take as a result of what we heard. And don't wait to do that for a significant period of time, because then it loses its luster, so to speak.
Yeah, if I could just add, Tiffanie, to what Tiffanie said, the workforce is going through a tremendous amount of what I like to call survey fatigue. where everyone's asking a lot. How are you feeling? What are you doing? What are you thinking? What, blah, 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 blah. All good. All really, really good. But really quickly, if there's no action taken, what happens is they stop responding.
Right.
In quote unquote trust, as we talked about a few minutes ago. So for me, the thing that I would start with is listening. Create personas. Anyone that's created personas pre-2020 needs to create personas again, because work has changed. And the attitude of the worker has changed. So listen to a group of workers, create those personas, and then immediately follow up with the actions we're going to take. And the actions don't have to be massive transformations. Like, transformations never end.
Right.
So how can I create those quick wins, show that I care, listen, and respond back with an action that ties directly to what you heard?
Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but I want to thank you, Tiffanie and Jason. It has been a great pleasure to spend time with you today and even up to today. So thank you for joining us. Looking forward to the next.
Thank you so much for hosting.
And thank you to the audience for spending time with us today. I know it's been 2.5 years since the Oracle community last met in person, and we're so thrilled about seeing you all again at Oracle Cloud World in Las Vegas. We'll continue the conversation of what matters live in person at Cloud World. I hope you'll join us there for unfiltered insights and into HR's biggest challenges. Thanks again today for joining us. Hope to see you in October.